There is a quiet fear no one teaches you to recognize, the fear of being forgotten. It makes you check your phone 10 times an hour, rush to reply to messages even when you're drained, and force a smile just to keep someone from leaving. Though you don't say it aloud, you live as if someone's silence is proof of your worth. But what if the opposite is true? What if the more you try to be present, the more they pull away? We're taught how to love others, but rarely how to stay with ourselves. The truth is, you weren't born to please everyone, and certainly not to chase anyone for validation. There is power in your stillness. Each time you choose not to react impulsively, you reclaim your agency. Stoic philosophy does not ask you to become cold. It teaches you to live from within, unshaken by emotions or the silence of others. And when you do that, when you stop chasing, that is, when you begin to become one. You've been taught connection the wrong way. From an early age, we were taught that if we want to be loved, we must give more. Call first, text first, always show concern. Be available whenever they need you, and if things start to cool down, just give even more. This approach may sound kind and sincere, but in truth, it deepens a hole within you, the belief that if you give enough, love will be returned. But if you pay attention, you'll see the opposite is often true. The one who gives too easily is often the first to be overlooked. Not because they lack value, but because they've made themselves so obvious that no effort is needed to keep them. The truth is, real connection doesn't come from one person's relentless effort. It comes from the balance of energy between two people, and most of us were taught wrong. Constant initiative, always being the one to start every conversation, isn't always a sign of love, but often a symptom of the fear of being forgotten. You can't bear silence because you haven't learned how to handle the void. You don't give the other person a chance to miss you because you've rushed to fill every space with your presence. And in doing so, you think you're building closeness, when in fact, you're erasing the deepest source of attraction, the desire to discover what is not yet possessed. Stoic philosophy teaches us that real allure doesn't come from trying to please, but from standing firm in who you are. Marcus Aurelius never said, "Find ways to be loved," but rather, "Live like a person of value, whether anyone sees it or not." When you live with that spirit, you no longer have to try so hard to be kept in someone's life. Your presence carries weight not because you shout, but because you are grounded and whole. And that's what the modern world often forgets. We chase validation, the seen but not replied to messages. The cold responses, clinging to the hope that if we're just a bit more patient, they'll come back. But that's not patience, that's trading self-respect for hope. And if you're living this way, it's time to pause and ask, am I truly connecting or merely trying to survive in someone's memory? True connection doesn't come from proving you're worthy of love. It comes when you realize you already are, and those mature enough will recognize it without needing reminders. This is where the real journey begins, not with a confession, but with a step back and a deep inward gaze. Am I living to be seen, or am I living to truly exist? 2. When you're always the initiator, you devalue yourself without knowing it. Most of us grow up believing that being proactive is a good thing, a sign of care, responsibility, and genuine emotion. And yes, in many areas of life work, learning, self-discipline, initiative is essential. But in relationships, especially those of emotional or romantic nature, constant initiative often hides an unseen imbalance. You're the one holding the rope, while the other simply grabs it when convenient. You text first, call first, check in first, plan first, send invites first, worry first, and apologize first, even when the fault may not be yours. At first it feels right, generous, kind, but pause and look closely. Do they ever do the same? Have you given them the space to take initiative? Or have you unknowingly claimed their role in the relationship? When you always start everything, you leave no room for them to enter willingly. Over time, that turns you from a gift into a given something they no longer need to work for. Stoicism doesn't oppose action, but it insists that action must come from clarity, not insecurity. Epictetus taught, "No one is free who has not mastered themselves." If you take initiative because it aligns with your values and genuine feelings, that's noble. But if you act merely to fill the emptiness or silence the fear of being abandoned, each step you take quietly chips away at your inner worth. It's not that they see you as less. It's that you've taught them you're always available, always trying first, and human nature rarely values what comes without cost. When you fall into the role of the one who always initiates, you stop being a destination, you become a means. And from there, attraction shifts away from who you are toward what you provide. That's when the relationship begins to slip. That's when you must ask, am I loving, or am I just trying to be accepted? 3. Silence isn't to punish, it's to observe. Silence is a powerful tool, yet many misuse it. They stay silent to provoke fear, restlessness, and doubt in others. This is the silence of sulking, of cold war, of power twisted into control. But that's not the silence Stoicism teaches. The Stoic doesn't use silence to wound. They choose it to observe, to listen inwardly, and to create space for truth to surface without the noise of emotion. In relationships, there are moments when you no longer know what the other truly feels, thinks, or where you stand in their mind. Our first instinct is often to act, send another message, ask another question, drop another hint. But the more you do, the less you see. Because you're no longer observing them, you're observing their reaction to your own insecurity. You measure their care by how they respond to your constant presence. But what happens when you stop? Not to punish, not to provoke guilt, but to see. When you're no longer initiating, do they step toward you? Silence then becomes an honest space. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't manipulate. It simply waits to see what's real. Those who care will feel that absence like a missing piece, not a relief. Those who don't, or never truly did, won't react at all. And that's not failure. That's truth. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control others' actions, only our own choices. Choosing silence doesn't mean you're weak or giving up. On the contrary, it's the act of a mind strong enough to resist filling every gap. It's when you no longer need to script the story, but step back to see clearly the role each person plays, including yourself. Silence is not the time you wait for someone to return. It's the time you return to yourself. And in that stillness, the truth will rise without force, without chase. 4. Attraction comes from mystery, not repetition. There's a paradox in how we seek connection. We want others to understand us, yet we end up telling them everything from the start. In early conversations, driven by fear of being judged and the desire to be accepted, we pour out our hearts' childhood stories, past wounds, hobbies, philosophies, old relationships, and every plan for the future. We think this will help them see us as authentic, deep, or worthy of love. But when the conversation ends, we find their enthusiasm fading, their effort shrinking, and we don't understand why. The truth is this: people aren't drawn to what they already grasp, but to what they haven't yet fully understood. When you lay out your entire life story in just a few meetings, you leave no room for imagination, no space for curiosity, no reason for them to want to know more. You rob them of the chance to connect the pieces, to slowly discover, to form a genuine emotional bond with each part of you, and that's what makes things go stale quickly. Not because you lack depth, but because you revealed all your layers too soon, out of rhythm. Stoicism doesn't teach us to hide or to be cryptic for the sake of it. It teaches the value of restraint. As Epictetus once noted, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth as a reminder to listen more than we speak. In relationships, this applies not just to dialogue, but also to self-revelation. Sometimes saying less allows others to feel more. An unfinished story keeps the listener coming back. An unexplained glance leaves an impression. A thought left unsaid lingers in their mind. Charm isn't in how much you say, but in the emotion you leave behind after saying it. When everything is explained, named, and declared out loud, there's nothing left for the other to reflect on. And without something to imagine, there's nothing left to hold them. Because humans, by nature, are drawn to what they can't fully grasp. Not because they enjoy the chase, but because mystery gives the mind meaning. So, learn to leave space. Don't reveal everything about yourself too quickly. Let others step into your world slowly, 1 layer at a time. Because true attraction doesn't come from repeating who you are. It comes from being still enough not to overspeak, and deep enough that others want to uncover the rest. 5. Silence isn't emptiness. It's the language of presence. There are moments in conversation when you don't need to say anything, and that silence is what stays with them. This might seem counterintuitive in a world where we're pressured to respond, to explain, to constantly express ourselves so we're not forgotten. But in truth, it's within silence that real presence begins to speak. I once went on a date that seemed unremarkable. No background music, no witty banter, no bold gestures. But there were long silences, so long that I felt I should fill them with a story. I almost did, but I didn't. I looked across the table, and they were looking back, not hurried, not awkward, just present. That was the moment I realized. Not all connection requires words. Some of the strongest bonds are woven in silence, because it proves 2 people can sit together without needing to escape themselves. We often confuse silence with distance, tension, or something wrong. But silence only becomes uncomfortable when we haven't learned to be with ourselves. The less grounded we are inside, the more we fear the quiet, because in that stillness, our insecurities rise. So we overtalk, over-explain, cling to replies, all to soothe a growing unease. But those who have learned to live with silence don't see it as empty. They feel its fullness, the fullness of peace, of self-possession, of not needing to strain for attention. Stoicism doesn't tell us to avoid emotion, but to master our response to it. Epictetus reminded us, it's not what happens that harms us, but how we respond to it. The same goes for silence. It isn't good or bad, it mirrors your inner state. If you're silent but anxious inside, others will feel tension. But if your silence comes from calm, people will naturally be drawn in. That is the true language of attraction, not clever words, not constant presence, but quiet confidence. When you're not trying to impress, you become unforgettable. When you don't rush to fill the void, you give others space to feel your real presence. And often that steady silence, that rooted stillness, is what makes you impossible to forget. 6. Empty compliments make you forgettable. We're often taught that compliments are good a way to show interest, courtesy, or to win favor. But what few people mention is that not all compliments have value. Used carelessly, they can make you seem forgettable. Not because you lack sincerity, but because you lack awareness of where their power really lies in timing, observation, and the pause before they're spoken. I once knew someone who began every conversation with kind-sounding praise. "You're amazing. You look great today. I love your energy." Each line was pleasant, but after a few repetitions, they began to feel empty. Not because they weren't true, but because they weren't grounded in anything specific. No depth, no observation, like a piece of candy, sweet, easy to digest, but quickly forgotten. And in a world where everyone is trying to be liked, what makes you stand out isn't how you praise, but how you listen before you speak. Stoic philosophy doesn't reject compliments, but it reminds us that speech should serve truth, not a craving for approval. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't waste time debating what a good person should be. Be one." If you want someone to feel seen, show up for them. Notice the details. Remember what they said. Don't rush into praise just to fill silence. A lazy compliment doesn't build connection. It breeds doubt. The power of a compliment isn't in how often it's said, but in how it's felt. When you praise someone at the right moment, with the right emotion, based on what you've genuinely seen, the way their eyes light up when they talk about what they love, how they stay calm under pressure, their quiet patience in small things, then your words become more than a phrase. They become recognition, validation, a gift. A Stoic doesn't speak more to be liked. They choose their words so truth isn't lost. And a rare compliment, placed with care to the right person at the right time, will make people remember you. Not because you flattered them, but because you truly saw them. 7. You don't have to be constantly available to prove your worth. There's a deep-seated misconception in how we live and love that the more present we are, the faster we respond, the more we show up, the more others will see our value. But in reality, constant availability doesn't make people appreciate you more. On the contrary, it may lead them to take your presence for granted as something easy, obvious, and therefore disposable. I used to reply to messages within minutes, even during meetings or when I was exhausted. I paused dinners, stopped mid-movie, interrupted my own thoughts just to respond to an emoji or a vague question. In my heart, I called that care, attentiveness, effort to preserve a bond. But over time, I realized I wasn't nurturing a mutual connection. I was reacting out of habit, like a conditioned reflex. As soon as there was a signal, I responded, as if being a few minutes late would somehow make me less valued. But you don't have to live like that. You don't need to be always available to prove that you matter. Your presence is not a 24/7 customer service. It is a gift, a conscious choice, a sign that you understand the value of your own time and energy. And those who truly respect you will understand this without needing you to constantly earn their approval. Stoic philosophy centers on self-control, knowing what deserves your reaction, what to let go of, and when to pause before losing yourself. The wise person, as Seneca wrote, does not let themselves be carried away by every gust of emotion or the expectations of others. That means you don't have to reply instantly, don't need to message first, don't have to be there every time someone reaches out, especially when you yourself need time to be with you. Your worth is not in how often you show up, but in the quality of the presence you bring. A thoughtful message at the right time, a slow but sincere response, being there when it truly matters. Those are what make others feel your importance. Not because you're always free, but because you're always real. And remember this, not being available all the time doesn't make you distant. It gives you boundaries. It makes you more valuable in the eyes of those who are deep enough to realize that presence should never be assumed. It should be honored through the respect they give in return. 8. Don't chase. Let others step toward you. Whenever a relationship becomes unclear, many people's instinct is to move closer. They try to spark conversation, initiate contact, send signal after signal, hoping persistence will bring a response. But in doing so, they quietly lose their position of balance within the relationship. They're no longer the one being approached, they become the pursuer. And in any relationship, when only one person keeps stepping forward, the gap doesn't close, it widens. True connection cannot be created through one-sided effort. It requires both people to step in, to invest, to be present with genuine intent. When you're always the one moving forward, you leave no space for the other person to reveal anything. They don't need to choose, reflect, or make an effort to sustain closeness. You've already taken that on, and when there is no challenge, no space for absence or longing, appreciation fades. To stop in this context isn't a tactic. It is an act of self-respect and autonomy. You don't stop to control anyone. You don't go silent to create tension. You stop to make space for truth to appear. Because only when you step back can you see who is actually stepping forward and who is simply standing still, benefiting from your continuous presence. Stoicism emphasizes mastering your inner world, not controlling circumstances. When you stop chasing, you're not abandoning the connection, you're redefining your position within it. You step away from the role of proving your worth and return to the role of knowing your worth. When you stop walking, others must choose. Either they step toward you with intention or stay silent, revealing they never intended to go further. Silence at the right time creates space. That space isn't punishment, it's clarity. It's where truth reveals itself, no longer hidden by hope, fear, or relentless effort. The right person will feel your absence as something that must be filled. The wrong one will disappear into it. And you don't need to chase them back, because if someone only shows up when you pursue them, their presence was never truly willing. Connection only has meaning when it's a mutual decision, not the result of a chase. So instead of always moving forward, try standing still, not to seem proud, but to give them a chance to show they're also willing to move toward you. 9. Not everyone who's silent is strong, but the strong know when to be silent. Silence isn't always a sign of depth or control. Some forms of silence stem from awkwardness, fear of rejection, or not knowing what to say to be heard. Some stay quiet because they're afraid of conflict, lack confidence to speak their mind, or don't have the inner strength to hold their ground under pressure. That kind of silence isn't power, it's withdrawal, a retreat hidden behind a calm facade. In contrast, strong people don't stay silent out of fear. They're silent because they understand not everything demands an immediate response. They don't need to argue to win, don't need to explain themselves to feel safe, don't need to answer every question to prove their worth. They choose silence not because they have nothing to say, but because they know that the most valuable parts of a conversation often live in the quiet between the words. Stoicism sees silence as a reflection of reason, of emotional discipline, not passivity. When Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen more than speak," he wasn't just referring to anatomy, but to the ratio between observation and reaction, between receiving and expressing. Those with inner strength know when to speak and when to let silence do the work. They aren't afraid of being misunderstood for a moment because they trust that truth may come late, but it always comes. The silence of the strong doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like presence. They don't speak to fill space, don't reply just to keep the dialogue going, don't speak just because others expect it. Their silence is a conscious choice, a way to hold their inner boundaries, a gentle reminder, I'm here, but I'm not swept away. Strong people know that power isn't in the number of words, but in the precision of each one. They don't use language to impress, they use it to clarify. And that's why, when they speak, people listen not because they shout, but because they often choose silence. That restraint makes every word they do say carry more weight than 1,000 rushed noises. Not everyone who stays silent has inner strength, but those who are truly strong always know how to choose silence at the right moment as a sign of courage, clarity, and the quiet confidence that what is worth saying will never need to be said loudly or often. 10. Attraction doesn't come from predictability, but from what's yet to be discovered. One of the most common misconceptions in how people seek connection is the belief that the more quickly and clearly you reveal yourself, the more closeness and trust you'll create. But that's only true at the level of information, not emotion. Because emotion doesn't grow from completeness, but from the desire to explore further. When someone already knows everything you think, feel, believe, and have experienced, their imagination has nowhere left to wander. And once there's nothing to wonder about, curiosity fades, and so does attraction. People are not drawn to what they've fully decoded. They're drawn to what makes them pause, replay a glance in their mind, wonder if there's something they missed. Attraction doesn't come from telling everything, but from knowing what to share, what to hold back, and what to let others feel for themselves. This is not a game of withholding or manipulation. It's the art of deep presence, of knowing how to end with an ellipsis, not a rushed conclusion. Stoic philosophy doesn't encourage you to be cold or distant, but it teaches that restraint is a sign of wisdom. As Aristotle once said, the beauty of a soul lies in its balance. When you reveal every corner of yourself too soon, you rob the relationship of its natural rhythm, its layers, its unfolding depth. You take away the other person's opportunity to discover and unintentionally make your presence feel predictable. One who knows how to hold back a piece of their story is someone who respects the journey of connection. They don't rush, don't try to be fully understood at the first meeting. They know that depth isn't something shown immediately, but something formed over time through silence, through unexplained moments. And that is what creates lasting intrigue, not because they try to be mysterious, but because they live truthfully, without needing to expose everything. The most magnetic people are not those who speak the most, nor those who remain completely silent. They are the ones who pause at the right time, leave a trace of mystery, create a rhythm that invites others to keep moving forward, to want to know just a little more. And when you learn to let others step into the journey of discovering you, you no longer have to try so hard to be impressive because the attraction has already formed, effortlessly. 11. Shifts in energy are inevitable. Let yourself be the one who sets the pace. In every relationship, the energy between two people is never still. It constantly moves, rising, falling, drawing near, pulling away. It's a natural rhythm, reflecting emotional aliveness, shifting awareness, and unseen influences like circumstances, expectations, or personal boundaries. What matters isn't how to keep the energy always high, but how to notice its movement and adjust the rhythm without losing yourself. Attraction doesn't come from everything always being stable. It comes from your ability to remain stable within yourself, even when external energies shift. When you feel the rhythm of connection slowing down, don't panic or rush to fix it. Pause and look closely. Maybe the stillness is necessary. Maybe the change in energy isn't your fault, but a sign the other person needs a space. Or maybe it's time to adjust how you show up, not to please, but to remind yourself that your identity isn't tied to someone else's emotional tempo. A Stoic doesn't try to control another person's energy, but they always control their response to it. They don't let instability pull them out of alignment. They don't force the bond to stay alive at all costs. They remain clear-eyed and composed. That self-possession makes them not only enduringly attractive, but also the one who holds the rhythm, the one who can slow things down when needed, speed up at the right moment, and stop before the energy becomes one-sided. Shifts are unavoidable, but your place in that current is your choice. You can let yourself be swept away, or you can be the one who steers. And the one who steers isn't the one trying to control others, but the one who has mastered themselves. 12. Stop trying to be chosen. Become someone worth choosing. We live in a world where being recognized, noticed, and selected has quietly become the goal in many relationships. Every time you initiate, every time you try to hold on to someone, every time you adjust yourself to fit their expectations, you're trading a part of your true value just to stay in someone's line of sight. But the truth is, your worth isn't in being chosen. It's in whether you are living as someone truly worthy of being chosen. The pursuit of being chosen often causes you to lose yourself. You bend to external standards, force yourself to be more likable, agreeable, acceptable. But the more you do that, the more you fade. Real attraction doesn't come from being pleasing to everyone. It comes from living in truth, holding depth, staying principled, and not wavering for the sake of fleeting approval. Stoic philosophy doesn't teach you how to make others like you. It teaches you how to become the highest version of yourself regardless of who's watching. Self-control, composure, measured responses, and unwavering dignity in all situations, these are the traits that make you rare. And that's what makes you worth choosing, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you're someone who doesn't shift just to be accepted. Stop seeking validation. Stop sacrificing your boundaries to be kept. Because once you become someone of character, depth, and awareness in how you live and connect, you no longer need to compete for a place. The right people will move toward you, not because you're chasing their approval, but because you've become who you are. Grounded, radiant, and deeply worth choosing. I used to believe that to be loved, I had to show up more, prove more, and become what others expected. But the more I did that, the further I drifted from myself. I began to realize that value doesn't lie in others' responses, but in how I treat myself each day. True attraction doesn't come from constant presence, but from knowing when to step back, when to keep distance, and when to honor the silence. I learned that not everyone who's silent is strong, but the strong don't need to say much. And I began to live that way deeply, slowly, without chasing, without straining. When I stopped trying to be chosen, I finally became someone worth choosing. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming content. Every time you choose self-development over the need for validation, you take a step closer to true freedom. Because those who understand themselves never have to chase just to be allowed to stay. See you in the next video.